Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
This is Pint Glass Football. Drink beer, talk NFL and college football. I'm your host, Brad Fowler, and McKinsey Brewing is the official beer of Pint Glass Football. Follow them at McKinsey Brewing. Follow us at pintglassfootball.com. If you're new to the show, hit that subscribe button. What's up, PGF Nation? The NFL Draft is this Thursday. And since we usually drop episodes on Thursday, I thought we'd get this episode out a little earlier so you guys could have time to listen before the draft. We got Trey Lance trade rumors, Tua talking retirement. We've got some potential draft trade scenarios to discuss, and we'll tell you each of our three favorite prospects in this draft and a lot more to get to. But joining me again to do so, my co-host, Alex Higdon. Alex, what's going on?
Hey, man, one week, and we officially, quote unquote, start the countdown to finally getting some football. I've been itching. I've been waiting. We've been talking about it. We've been mocking, and now we're just a week away, so I can't wait.
Man, I am with you, man. I can't wait. This is going to be so much fun. The draft is so much fun. I just love it. I know you do. Going to be glued to the TV, watching where all these guys go, seeing who these teams select is so much fun. I want to start with some NFL news like we usually do. This might be one of the best feel-good stories I've seen in a while. Demar Hamlin is making an NFL comeback. The Bills announced that the safety was cleared for football activity. As we all know, he suffered the cardiac arrest in a Monday Night Football game versus the Bengals last season, which put him in critical condition for multiple days. Hamlin received CPR on the field after he collapsed after a collision with Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins. It was one of the scariest moments that I can really ever recall witnessing in a sporting event. To see him not only back and healthy, but cleared to play football is absolutely incredible. He said, quote, "My heart is still in it. My heart is still in the game. I love the game. It's something I want to prove to myself, not nobody else. I just want to show people that fear is a choice." Alex, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, and we, as you've heard me say, I love Western Pennsylvania players. This kid from Keys Rock, Pennsylvania, went to the University of Pittsburgh, was a sixth-round pick, and started 13 games. So he played himself. Obviously, if you're a sixth-round pick, you're kind of on the lower end of what, scouts may think of you, but they think you have a possibility. And he paid off as a sixth-round pick. Played in 15 games, started 13, 91 tackles, 63 solo, 28 assists, 6 tackles for loss, 3 QB hits, plus a sack and a half, 2 passes defended, and 1 forced fumble. As a sixth-round pick, that stat line lets me know that you belong in this league. And I'm happy that he is now been cleared, because he does belong in this league. He played himself. These are one of the stories that we always love to hear. The NFL is made up of 33% undrafted free agents. I can't give you the percentage on the lower round picks, but this is what the NFL is all about. This is where you earn your money as a scout. And I'm so happy he's going to hopefully be able to safely continue his career.
Man, you put it perfectly. It's going to be incredible. The moment that he steps back onto a field and walks out in front of those fans, home or away, it's not going to matter. This is an NFL story. This is way beyond the Bills. The entire nation and everyone who watches this sport was completely lost for words when this went down. It was shocking. It was scary. We were all just hoping and praying for this kid. And to see him come back, when that moment happens, when he makes his NFL comeback, it is going to be absolutely amazing. It's something that I can't wait to see. We're all cheering for him, and you're right. The grit, the toughness, the determination, the passion. When he says, "I love the game," this is why the NFL is king. This is why football is king in this country, and continues to say that way because of the passion and the love that these guys play the game with.
Absolutely. Welcome back, Demar Hamlin. Can't wait to see you back on the field.
Man, no doubt about it. Now, here's a big story that dropped. really right after the last episode. And it was unfortunate. One of those things that just timing happens where a news story drops right after we're basically done with the episode. So we didn't get a chance to discuss it. 49ers quarterback Trey Lance. Multiple reports have said that the 49ers are getting calls for a potential trade for the former number 3 overall pick. Ian Rappaport said that the conversations have been a result of San Francisco taking calls, not making them, with teams aware that Brock Purdy is likely the future starter for the Niners. Alex, let's start here. Should they trade Trey Lance? This is a young quarterback who they traded up to draft just a couple years ago.
Shout out to Kyle Shanahan and the coaching staff in the front office to understand it's okay to pivot if you made a mistake. We know they gave up a lot of picks, but however, they're no longer stuck with those huge first round contracts of quarterbacks where they would have be stuck with this player. They can easily move him, absorb the cap hit, move on with Brock Purdy. They brought in Sam Darnold to be a part-time starter, and they're obviously comfortable with him backing up Brock Purdy once he comes along, and they obviously give Trey Lance to go someplace else, salvage some of those picks, although they may not be as high, but salvage some picks when they trade him, and then give that young man an opportunity to start someplace else. So I salute businesses, well, in this case, particularly the NFL teams that understand this was a mistake. Let's pivot off of it. Let's get him out of the locker room so it's not contentious in any way, shape, or form, and simply move forward. Rip off the Band-Aid. Let's move forward.
I totally get what you're saying here with Trey Lance. Being able to pivot off of a young quarterback because of the contract. And look, Brock Purdy looked every bit the part last year. This guy comes in, regardless of where he was taken, Mr. Irrelevant, 7th round pick. I get all that, but this guy played at a high level up until that injury. The question I guess I have is that with him coming off of that injury, I almost wonder, why would they want to move Lance right now? I mean, Brock was really good last year, and maybe he is the future, but there's just so much uncertainty at the quarterback position because him coming off that injury. They still haven't seen really enough games from Trey Lance to really know what he's become.
Here's where I rely, Kyle Shanahan being, and obviously his father, Mike Shanahan, being one of the better offensive minds in this game. I trust what the coaches see in practice. Apparently, and obviously, they've seen enough. They've made an evaluation, and not only are they ready to say that he can't be a starter here, he can't even be the backup here. Let's completely move off of him. And that's why I applaud them for saying, okay, he may not be a fit for what we do. Perhaps he's a fit someplace else. So let's make the decision. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. We've seen enough in practice. Let's move on, as this is the only sport where you practice more than you actually play. So you get to see a lot more when there's no hard hitting. He has the yellow cap or the red cap on, so he can't be hit. And if he's not showing what the plays that they're drawing up in practice that he can complete them, then what does that look like when they translate it to the field? It looks like it probably cannot work. So again, I applaud them for saying it's not working here. It's okay. We'll move off and we'll move on.
Yeah, and with him being such a young guy, I think there is a lot of trade value right now. So why not move him? Why not get some picks back? Like you said, get some of that draft capital back. It's not a terrible idea. It really isn't. It just seems crazy, this new era of NFL quarterbacks and how quickly we can pivot from one guy to the next. But you made a great point there, because as fans, we've only seen him start a couple games. But Kyle Shanahan and that staff has seen a lot more reps in practice and behind the scenes, the stuff that we don't see. And so that might be more than enough for them to feel confident about moving on. Now, after this story broke, I asked PGF Nation with a Twitter poll question. Right now, 63% said yes, the Niners should trade him. 37% say no. Sounds like you're not surprised by those results because you're on the side that says yes, they should move him.
I believe there are at least 4 landing spots where he could go, where he would have an opportunity to either start and or compete with the Miami Dolphins. Yes, they picked up Mike White. I'm not sold on Mike White being a starter. Perhaps he's a good backup, but given the shakiness and what they have going on with Tua, I would want more of a capable backup there. If you are looking at an opportunity that you have here to make a leap, to take a shot, and there is a lot of medical history here with Tua, you would want a true blue backup quarterback back there, and or somebody with the pedigree of Trey Lance. And again, the familiarity with that offense already being in Miami, he can slide in and fit right in, and it won't be a big learning curve for him. And he does have familiarity with the coach and the scheme, and I think he can fit right in, slide right in. So even if, God forbid, something happens to Tua, you have a capable guy that can come in, knows the offense, and can do some things right away. The other one, Tennessee. Tennessee is looking, they're in flux right now. I know they have a new GM. We know they're not keeping Ryan Tannehill. We know Malik Willis is not ready. Why not take a shot and grab a guy here? You have the opportunity to keep him for 3 years, this year, next year, and then you have the 5th-year option, and you can figure some things out as you rebuild between Malik Willis as well as Trey Lance. Detroit. Jared Goff, very good quarterback, growing in that system. However, he's got one more year, not this year, but this year and then the following year left on his contract before they're going to have to make another big decision if they want to move forward. You have a young OC there who looks like he knows what he's doing. Get him in there with Ben Johnson. Let's see what he can do. Maybe you do have somebody there that you can transition to if Jared Goff has maxed out, or if you don't feel that you see a future with him. You have a guy in your organization, you pick up the 5th-year option, you have him there for 2 years, you can take a look at him and then make a decision to either move forward Jared Goff or maybe perhaps move off of Jared Goff as you've coached this guy up in your system and he's a fit and you can move forward with him. So those would be the 3 teams that I'm looking at.
Yeah, those all make so much sense. Tennessee with the 11th pick could be on the outside looking in at one of these top prospects in this upcoming draft. I liked what you said about Miami. That made a whole lot of sense, especially the familiarity with that system and the coaching staff. Really like the idea of that. Detroit's interesting as well because, like you said, Jared Goff's really played pretty well for Detroit. He's a solid quarterback, but I think we all question how much of a ceiling does he have. Wouldn't be a bad spot for him where he could develop under a veteran quarterback for a year or two and maybe be the guy to take over long term. But speaking of Tua, reports have come out that the Dolphins quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, has considered retirement. After last season, he was considering retirement. He missed 5 games due to injury last year, including multiple concussions, but he has ultimately decided to continue playing. After discussing this with his family and doctors, Tua further noted to reporters that doctors and specialists told him that there's no evidence he's at greater risk for concussions or CTE. Look, Alex, I hate when injuries become a part of any player's story, but does this retirement talk from Tua, does it make the Dolphins consider looking at a quarterback in this draft, even if it's just a mid-round pick? Or, like we just mentioned here, and you brought up with Trey Lance, do they get on the phone and start looking for maybe a future guy that they can build around if Tua isn't the long-term answer, unfortunately, because of health issues?
Absolutely. You have to consider it. What is the saying in all of sports where they say if you mention retirement, you already have 1 foot out of the door? Even though this was probably a holistic conversation with him, talking about himself, being in the moment of with having those concussions and thinking that his career is over in true terms of the context of what he was speaking to. But the fact that he considered it, as we know in all sports, that's like, well, you already have 1 foot out of the door. Once you start mentioning it, now your mind starts to slip there. And if, God forbid, there's another injury, that thought process is going to come back again. Hopefully, he's fully healthy. He can continue on. He looked like he was probably going to be the MVP had he continued on. You know, with all due respect to Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, but he was on a record-breaking pace along with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So if he can right the ship, back on track and playing football and being healthy, he moves forward. But if I'm an organization, I have to do what's best for my organization. So whether I actually trade for a Trey Lance or I wait until anywhere between the 3rd and the 5th round and I try to get, and I'm using air quotes, get a guy to train up behind him, because in addition to that, he still hasn't gotten a contract. He also is he has 1 more year after this season. They're going to have to make some big decisions too on him as well. So this is a year of their influx as well at the most important position on a football team to figure out whether they see, and they have to project out what does a 5-year plan for the Dolphins look like, and does it include Tua? And I think that's where you find and where you make your decision at how you're going to need to move, whether you trade for a quarterback or whether you draft one in this draft. What are you going to do?
Yeah, you're 100% right, and I agree with you completely, because we saw last year during that stretch before the injuries, he was playing at a pretty high level. He was playing the best football of his career in this new system with this new coach and with these new weapons around him with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. It was starting to look like Miami really had found their guy, so to speak, because there was big question marks after his first couple of years in the league, whether or not he could stay healthy, develop into a franchise quarterback. Was he the guy? I think we started to have a lot of those questions become answered with the way he played during that stretch. But then unfortunately injuries reared its ugly head again. And now there's more question marks than maybe answers. I think I'm with you, though. The Dolphins, I think, have to be prepared. I think they have to have an insurance plan in place here.
You have to put your CEO hat on here and not think about the team and being attached to the players. What is the projection out for this organization? What is our cap going to look like? What do we need to do? Because if you're not thinking like that as a CEO of an organization like this, then I don't know how you plan on succeeding in this league, because the best teams are the ones that plan out, have a 2, 3, 4, 5 year plan on where they are now and where they expect to be in those 5 years. So it's impertinent that they pay attention this season to what they need to do to keep the momentum that they have now started in Miami.
I want to jump into some possible NFL draft trade scenarios. I thought this would be a lot of fun, Alex. We know that this stuff is really unpredictable, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of break down a couple different scenarios that we could see possibly happening on Thursday night. Why don't you kick it off, Alex? What are you thinking first could happen here?
Number one with the bullet, the number 3 pick, Arizona Cardinals. I can imagine that their phone has been ringing off the hook ever since that Carolina Panthers trade happened. Them going from 9 to 1. So now there's some parameters around what a trade would look like to move up to 3, even though we have recent history with the Trey Lance pick. But now with this new trade, now the new parameters are set again, and Arizona can really make an informed decision and probably has, I would think, maybe 4 to 5 scenarios in front of them and pick the best scenario that works for them. Arizona leads a lot of things. We just mentioned last episode, Budda Baker, their premier defensive players, asking for a trade. So in recent history, this has not been the best run organization. So now's the time to make some hard decisions, look at those scenarios that are in front of you, make the trade that makes the best sense to you. Because you can stay there, and I believe you mocked Will Anderson to them, but is that the game changer you need? Is that the one pick that's going to do something different? Or with a season where you're not going to have your starting quarterback, you're more than likely not going to be very good this year, how about trading back, accumulating picks this year and next year to now when you have your quarterback back in the fold, you have now accumulated a bunch of picks that turned into a bunch of players that now can mesh and you can move forward with a plan. That would be my suggestion for the first trade option that I see in round 1 is the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And I had Arizona on my list as well. And I think for obvious reasons, a lot of them you touched on. DeAndre Hopkins is a guy to watch as well. We've talked about Budda Baker, but DeAndre Hopkins has been subject to a lot of trade rumors throughout the offseason. Like we mentioned, Budda Baker requesting a trade. This team just fired Cliff Kingsbury, even though they have their quote-unquote quarterback in Kyler Murray. And I put that in air quotes here because I'm not the biggest believer in Kyler, as most of you guys know. Now, he's under contract moving forward, but it still feels like they want to start rebuilding this team. That's kind of the vibe I get with them. This isn't a very deep class of wide receivers. So I could see a team who feels like they're a contender getting aggressive and making a move for Hopkins that involves draft picks. Don't be surprised if Arizona trades back from that 3rd pick, like we've talked about here, like we've talked about on earlier episodes. Move some star power as well to acquire a lot of draft picks so that they can reshape this roster going forward.
I was looking at the draft, and a moment ago, I did not have this as one of my options, but now that I mentioned a possible landing spot for Trey Lance, I'm looking at number 11. I'm looking at the Tennessee Titans. I think with that new GM, they're going to be sellers. I think we're going to watch a lot of players get moved from that team, not be resigned. We don't know what Malik Willis is. We know they're not keeping Ryan Tannehill. We know they already said they want to trade Derrick Henry, whether it happens during this draft or whether it happens in next offseason. This team is not going to be together. And I believe Jeffrey Simmons is actually coming up for a deal as well. I would love Jeffrey Simmons on the Raiders, but that's a whole other story. But this is one, again, a top 3 interior defensive lineman that will perhaps be traded, or they won't re-sign him and he'll hit free agency. I think they're going to trend towards a huge rebuild. Once again, unless there's a game changer there at 11, trade that pick, trade down, accumulate picks. This is the NFL draft. The number one thing you need is bodies, and capable bodies. A saying I heard when they were talking about the Indianapolis Colts. They may not have hit a lot of home runs, but they hit a lot of singles and doubles with the picks that they made. Meaning they didn't hit a home run, but you know what? They got on base. They got on base, meaning they got to start it here. They got to start it here. They got to start it here, whether it be between the third and the seventh and undrafted free agent. They picked up quality players in every single round, and that's how you build a team. So don't be afraid. You're going to be sellers. That's what I'm looking at as I project out. Whatever player you draft at 11 is not going to be the game changer. Make a firm decision. Look at your projection board. If it's not there, get out of that. Look at your scenarios. Make the best decision for you.
Yeah, Tennessee is a team that I've talked about as well on earlier episodes because I think that's a team to watch for as far as making a move. And it's going to be really interesting which direction that move is. Do they try to get aggressive and trade up to try to get one of these top quarterback prospects and start the rebuild at the most important position? Or do they trade back and just try to acquire more picks to fill out more roster spots, knowing that there is going to be a lot of turnover? This is a team that just feels like it peaked a couple years ago. This current roster feels like we've kind of seen the best of what they could have been. It was good, but not good enough. We saw them make some playoff runs, but just never quite got over the hump. And I think that this regime, it's time to rebuild. It's time to hit the reset button and start over. I think they know that. And that's why I think that that's a team really to keep an eye on to see which direction they go here, how they start that rebuild. So that's a fascinating team to watch at number 11, certainly. A team that I'm watching here because I have a hard time seeing Will Levis not getting drafted in the first 8 picks. I think more than likely he's going to go somewhere in that top 8. But Chicago at 9, we know they're not taking a quarterback. In Philadelphia at 10, then becomes a really interesting spot if Levis does slide in this draft like a lot of analysts think he might. Titans at 11, we know and just talked about here, they could and should be thinking quarterback. Does a team like Tampa Bay at 19, who now has this Tom Brady-sized hole at the position, do they trade up with Philly and include the 19th pick and possibly a 2024 first-round pick to get a guy like Will Levis if he was to slide here? It would make sense that teams in the middle of the first round would start really considering a trade up at that point if Levis starts to slide out of that top 5, 6, 7. Eagles GM Howie Roseman has shown in the past that he'll make moves during the draft. He's not afraid to wheel and deal. Eagles at 10 and a team like Tampa Bay, one of these teams kind of in the middle, back half of the draft that desperately need a quarterback, I think that's a potential trade spot to watch.
Yeah, 10 at Philly, they do have a lot of, and I did project out, you know what, I will say thank you to the fans that have been listening. Someone contacted me and I made I don't want to say a small error, but I did overlook Philly did draft a few players and some holes that I had projected out when we were doing the mock draft, where they were talking about they had drafted some offensive linemen, so they had been thinking about that in the future. So Philly, don't be afraid to move back. You have huge holes at linebacker. Huge holes. They still have not replaced. I believe they lost Kazir Smith. Kobe Dean is there, but he's coming off injury. Trade back, accumulate some more picks, get some more youth there. We don't know what's going to happen. I know they did something with Darius Slade. We don't know if he's going to be disgruntled again next year. You lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson. How about move back, draft Brian Branch, the safety from Alabama? You can stick somebody back there that you can get in the later round, and then accumulate some more picks that you can then fill the team out as well in the later rounds as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Philly did consider that. Howie Roseman, obviously we know who he is, a big wheeler and dealer, understanding how the draft works, and I trust his judgment. I wouldn't be mad at that at all.
Now, I mentioned the Bears at 9 as well there. Now, they already traded back from 1 to 9 because they clearly are buying into Justin Fields as their future franchise quarterback. But the Bears still have a lot of holes to fill. This is a team that we know is clearly in full rebuild mode. GM Ryan Poles has made it clear that he believes the best way to fill those holes is through the NFL draft. So just like the last scenario, does a team in the middle to late first, do one of those teams trade up with the Bears to get a quarterback, especially if, once again, a guy like Will Levis, maybe Richardson, or even the supremely talented Jalen Carter, who many think, because of off-the-field concerns, he could also slide in this draft as well. If he's available after the 8th pick, does somebody get on the phone with Chicago and make a trade for him at the 9th pick? It might be worth it for some teams, especially considering that this isn't a very strong defensive tackle class. And to get a guy with his caliber of talent, that could be another place where Chicago says, hey, we've got a lot of holes to fill. Why don't we trade back again and just keep getting more picks?
I have no problem with this one either. I see it. We talked about Justin Fields needing a lot of help. They did try to do some things with the trade, obviously with the trade and getting DJ Moore. They got a bona fide, strong number one target for him, along with Chase Claypool. However, that offensive line, and I can imagine with them at number 9, probably being the first team able to pick their pick of those 2 top tackles. This may be a hard decision for them to make, but if you're going to work your draft board and if the scenario is right, I would not be surprised if they did make a move here, understanding they have a lot of holes to fill on offense and defense. And again, accumulating picks and then making the right pick. Obviously, the draft is a crapshoot. However, trust your board, trust your scouts, trust your scheme, draft to your scheme, and make the right choices, and you will be fine. Again, you don't always have to hit a home run. I think that's where a lot of GMs get caught. They're always looking to make the home run. It's okay to hit a single or a double, or sometimes even a sacrifice fly. Get players that can contribute to the team in every single round. I have one more trade scenario. This is an interesting one, and I had this one. I put an asterisk next to this one because I wasn't sure if I was going to talk about them. The Green Bay Packers. You are now in a new era. You have a left tackle that's getting old. You need hits at receiver. You lost your tight end. You're losing some defensive pieces. Why not trade back from 15 and get some more pieces? Bakhtiari is going to retire soon. He probably maybe has 1 to 2 more years. The one thing we do know about the Green Bay Packers, if not anything else, they draft well. This team does not get big-time free agents, but understanding that, they have a very strong scouting staff. They trust their big board at all times, and they bring in contributing players. Again, I hate to kill a dead horse, but always hitting singles and doubles, and they just always have contributors no matter what. Do it again. Trade back, trade out, get some more pieces, create a system for Jordan Love that puts him in the best position to win. If I was Green Bay, if the scenario was right, I would make a move here and trade out.
Hey, PGF Nation, are you tired of the same old bland food at your tailgate parties? Well, let me tell you about my friends at the Tailgate Foodie, the seasoning and barbecue sauce company that specializes in elevating your tailgate and backyard cooking game. With their unique blend of spices and sauces, the Tailgate Foodie will take your taste buds on a flavor journey that you won't forget. Use code PintGlassFoodie for 15% off your first order at thetailgatefoodie.com. I hadn't given a lot of thought to Green Bay, but it makes a lot of sense because you're right. With a young quarterback coming in, a new era, like you said, ushering in that new era, this is a team that's got talent, but they've got some holes as well. And there's clearly some spots that they need to fill. Why not trade back there? Unless there's a guy at 15 that falls to you or a guy on your board that you're just like, we just cannot pass up on this guy. It makes sense for Green Bay to make a move there. And once again, we don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be. We don't know, you never really know what players other teams are coveting. So there could be a player that slides in this draft, maybe outside of the quarterback position, that someone is sitting there at the 13th pick goes by, the 14th pick goes by, and they're sitting there going, man, we can't believe fill in the blank is still here. Get on the phone with Green Bay. Let's see if we can make a move. And that gives Green Bay an opportunity to get more picks. We've seen them make moves in the past. They made some moves within their division last year in the draft and got some additional picks. So that's an interesting one. All right, with the NFL draft right around the corner, I thought it'd be fun to come up with each of ours top 3 favorite players in this draft. Now, we put out some rankings. We've done some mocks. We've broken down a lot of guys. We've talked about sleepers. But now we're going to give you each of our favorite guys, the kind of guys that if we were the GMs in the war room, we'd be pounding the table saying, don't let this guy slip past us at this pick. Alex, why don't you start with one of your favorite players in this draft?
Well, this is a guy I've been mentioning a lot, and you actually pointed out to me when we were doing our mock. We both missed this guy. I thought I had already mocked him to Detroit. His name is Lucas Van Ness from Iowa, edge rusher. This guy has the body and frame. You can put him on the line in a 4-3, or you can stand him up. He has the speed that you can stand him up in a 3-4, running a 4.58 40-yard dash. So you can put him at both positions. He can fit any scheme. I love this kid. High motor, fires out of his stance. He does tend to get caught leaning forward. He doesn't have a lot of moves once he's engaged, so he doesn't detach well, but those are all things that you can coach up. If you have effort, I believe you can always teach anything. I know as a Raider fan, I watched Max Crosby. There were a lot of times he got pressure and or sacks simply off of effort alone. And the motor that doesn't stop, ask any left tackle, I don't care if they're Jonathan Ogden or I don't care if they're me or you. They do not want to deal with the guy that's always running at 100 miles an hour no matter what, because they get tired during the game. Okay? This is a guy that's going to be in the right place at the right time, a leader, always going to be moving forward, always going to be going at 100 miles an hour no matter what. And this is, to me, this guy is a coach's dream because you can coach him up. He can wreak havoc in the right system.
Yeah, Lucas Van Ness is just awesome, and I'm with you. I really like this guy, and it's funny because off the air we had this conversation. I realized that we didn't mock Lucas Van Ness in the first round. We dropped the ball, guys. Let's just face it. We dropped the ball on that one. I don't think there's any way that he gets out of the first round. He is easily one of the best prospects in this class, a guy that I really like as well, and for a lot of the reasons that you said. Not only does he have the physical traits that a lot of people look for when you're talking about an edge defender, when you're talking about a defensive lineman, but when you combine those traits with the work ethic, with the motor and the drive and the things that you touched on, now you've got a home run prospect. Now you've got a guy that, yeah, he's got to polish up some parts of his game, but when you've got a guy that puts in the effort and puts in the work and he has the physical tools to go with it, you're talking about a guy with a really high ceiling. I love your comp to Max Crosby. I think it's a good one because this is the kind of player he could become. Heck, maybe even better. The sky's the limit for a guy like Lucas Van Ness. Alex, one of my favorite players in this draft, and haven't talked a ton about him, but he came up in the mock draft, the last episode we did. Zay Flowers, wide receiver out of Boston College. Only 5'9", 185 pounds. I get it. Not the most physically imposing guy, but he plays like a guy who's way bigger than his frame. So dynamic, so versatile, so tough. Receiver and a rusher at Boston College. The guy just did so many different things for that offense. Tracks and catches deep balls. Explosive player. He's quick and fast. He can pull away from defenders. He forced 25 missed tackles last season. That is third most in all of college football. Some people want to say that he's only a slot receiver. I just don't buy into that. I think that he proved at Boston College that he can play inside or outside despite his size. And I'll give you a perfect player comp for this guy. I think he could be the next Steve Smith.
Zay Flowers, I have him as the number one wide receiver on the board. Strong, fast, burst out of the box. If you play press man coverage, he's going to have a little bit of a problem, but you can learn to deal with that with strength. I do like the Steve Smith senior comp. However, I think the only reason, and as we all know, he's being mocked to the slot is simply because of that 5'9" frame, 182 pounds. And Steve Smith was built like Mighty Mouse. And that's not saying that he can't grow into that, but when we first initially saw Steve Smith, he was just a kick return, a punt return. He was not getting a lot of burn, especially with Mushin Muhammad on that team. But he developed, he worked, and he became the future Hall of Famer Steve Smith Sr., I believe top 10 all time in yards receiving. This guy he is going to fit in wherever you put him. Florida kid, went to Boston College, coached well at Boston College. There's a lot of stigma about Florida players in the winter. Obviously, he's not going to have that playing in Boston. This guy's going to come in, and again, you're picking another player that I think coaches will love to coach, who just wants to play and be great. All the way through, looked great, can get, I believe if I'm not mistaken, he ran the entire route tree. 9 route he struggled with, again, because if you can get hands on him, you are able to reroute him. That's probably going to be his biggest challenge in the NFL, but everything else, all the other weaknesses and things that I've seen, those are all things that'll be easily for him to overcome. The only thing with getting jammed at the line is an IQ aspect of it. He'll have to figure those things out as any incoming wide receiver at his size. But I do love this guy. I think he is a can't miss pick.
Another guy on my 3 favorite players list, Will McDonald, edge defender out of Iowa State. A guy that came up in the mock recently, and a guy that we haven't gotten a lot of chance to talk about, but I really, really like Will McDonald. He'll be a perfect fit as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 system. I think that's where he's going to fit best in the NFL. If he gets drafted to a team that runs a system that can utilize his skills, I think he's going to be a big-time player in this league. Big-time production in college, 34 sacks, 10 forced fumbles. He is a natural pass rusher. This is a guy who knows how to get after the quarterback. He knows how to get in the backfield. He was a beast at the Senior Bowl. And that's when he really got on my radar. At the Senior Bowl, this guy was basically unblockable. And you're going up against a whole bunch of other NFL prospects, and this guy was dominant in that setting. Love his motor, love the work ethic. The guy plays hard on almost every down. I think in the right system and the right fit, he's going to be a really good one.
Agreed. Again, coaching. He does have a little bit of an issue bringing down players once he gets a hold of them. But again, you can teach that through technique, and those are the easy things to clean up. What you want from a guy that you're going to bring onto your team is he given the effort? Does he know what to do? The little things about breaking down and how to tackle, understanding angles and things, you can teach those things to a guy like Will McDonald. But is he coachable? Coachable. Every single player that we've been talking about is a coachable player. And if you have one of those guys, you have a guy that you can perhaps get on base with and end up going all the way around and hitting a home run, because this guy's going to put in the work to be a player on your team. So for my last pick, I was looking around. I said, you know what? No, I'm going to go with another guy that I believe is a can't miss prospect, somebody that I'm very high on, somebody that I mocked, to my Las Vegas Raiders, Christian Gonzalez. Size, speed, determination, knowing how to use his hands, burst out of box, can play man coverage, little shot in the zone, but you want a guy that can play man. And I also believe that he can travel as well. Now, I believe, this is my take, he is a can't miss prospect. He is not going to be Patrick Surtain or anything like that. So let me put some parameters around that and add a lot of context. But this guy is a solid day one starter, and you can put him on the number 1 receiver immediately and have him work. Of course, like any other player, he will get beat, but he will figure it out because he is a worker. Of course, the small things, you have to work on technique, you have to work on the breakdown, keeping your eyes off the backfield, keep your eyes out of the backfield, understanding the route concepts that are in front of you, understanding what's going on when audibles are called, understanding when they're switching off and what your responsibility is, specifically in zone coverage. But again, those are things that if you are a worker, that you can sit down and film study, you can work your way and work yourself into an elite player simply by paying attention, doing the film work. I heard this guy is a film junkie. And as you know, Brad, I'm a film junkie as well. And anybody that's sitting there with his ability that's a film junkie, you will easily be able to figure out the holes in a lot of other receivers' games and be in the right place at the right time to make the big plays and be the big-time player that I think you are and a can't-miss prospect.
You already know, Alex, how much I love Christian Gonzalez. I mean, I've been talking about this kid the last few episodes as well, and it's because he checks so many boxes. I mean, he plays with so much confidence. He's quick and fast, play recognition, just gets it, tackles in open space, great ball skills. I've said on earlier episodes, he is the prototype for a lockdown NFL corner. Can't miss prospect. I couldn't agree more. And I hate using can't miss. And if you guys notice, I don't use it very often because I think it's really tough to actually be a can't miss guy at any position. But this is a guy in this class that might just be the closest thing to a can't miss prospect. He's my number one ranked defender in this class, Alex. I have him as my number one guy on the big board when it comes to defense, maybe the best player in this entire draft. I'm that high on Christian Gonzalez. Now, Jalen Carter is the most talented player, but there's just way too many red flags with his character. Gonzalez has virtually no holes in his game, and from all accounts, has his head on his shoulders too. Just love the kid. I couldn't agree more. I think he is just a home run, day one stud the second he touches an NFL field. And it's funny that you bring up Christian Gonzalez because the last guy on my 3 favorites list is actually a guy that is really being compared to him that's in that same group. Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois, the other top cornerback in this class. And these guys are going to go in the top 10. I don't think there's any doubt. These are top 10 prospects for sure. They're hands down the 2 best corners in this class. And they're 2 of the better corner prospects we've seen in a couple years now. Christian Gonzalez, like I just mentioned, I have him as my number one defender. He's my number one corner. I think he's a better prospect than Devin Witherspoon. But if we're talking about favorite players, man, Witherspoon is just the funnest tape to watch out of anybody that I scouted during this whole process. I mean, this guy is just awesome. Hits like a linebacker, so physical, so tough. I love his demeanor. This guy is a junkyard dog on the football field. And man, I just love those kind of players, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Guy is an intimidating force back there. He's got the quickness, the size, the length. He disrupts wide receivers. So many things to like about his game, the attitude, the toughness, coachability. Similar to Christian Gonzalez, just more physical. Such a good tackler. He's a guy that's going to be a weapon supporting the run in the secondary, not just a guy that can cover, a very complete player. And like I said, just so fun to watch his tape and what he did in the Big Ten.
Yeah, absolutely. This guy is a hitter. If you are in the running game, if you think you're going to, slide by this guy and he's going to miss you, no, he tackles and he tackles with intent. So if you think you're going to catch the ball, he's going to hit you and he's going to dislodge the ball. Nothing is going to come easy with Devin Witherspoon. Period, point blank, end the discussion. This guy's a quintessential cornerback that's not afraid to put his head in there and make the big tackle. I love Devin Witherspoon. When we were going through the mock, it was really a toss-up on what you really liked about each cornerback between him and Christian Gonzalez. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we mocked them back to back. I think I took Christian Gonzalez to the Raiders, and I believe you took Witherspoon to the Lions, if I'm not mistaken. I could be off there. But we were very high on both of these guys, so I'm not surprised you went here as well. Okay, this is a guy, I've been mentioning him, watched him a lot since high school. My son played against him in high school football, Hendon Hooker. I know there was a little bit of pushback, as we've heard. Shout out to ESPN 700 for giving you that hit and talking about that. But I'm going to pick up my guy again, Hendon Hooker. This guy interviews well, which is the only thing he can really do right now. He's going to be out for a year, obviously due to the injury. He'll have an opportunity to sit and learn. He's going to have an opportunity to go to a very good team because, as we spoke about, and I know you'll speak to later in our off-air conversations, he's really picked up his draft stock moving up the draft. And I think we may see him anywhere between 20 and 31. He's going to go. And those are all playoff teams, which means he's going to go to a good team that has a good offensive line, that has a good coaching staff, that's ready-made for him if they decide to move off their quarterback. You have a year to learn, year to soak it in, year to train, year to practice, get his footing back under, and then be able to show some things in his second year. I love Hendon Hooker. He's going to be a player. I will not say star. We always have to see it play out on the field. I don't have outside of Bryce Young, He's all the other quarterbacks I'm kind of wary of, but this is the guy that I love. This is the guy I think that's going to outwork everybody. I love any type of player that can come into the league. Demar Hamlin, shout out to you again, as I was mentioning before, that will just come in and do the work. If you have a guy that can come in and do the work, you have a player. And that's what Hendon Hooker is. Hendon Hooker is a player, and you can develop him, and he can become something. I'm not saying he's going to be Jalen Hurts in terms of development, but this is a guy that's going to work hard and do whatever you need him to do to try and win a game.
Alex, you've been high on Hendon Hooker for a while now, and I think you were ahead of the curve. And this is a guy that seems to be building a lot of draft buzz, a lot of momentum, a guy that I think a lot of people a couple months ago would have said second round, maybe even third round, a guy that has a lot of talent, but coming off the injury, and some people kind of turned off at the fact that he's 25 years old. You're always looking for, younger quarterback prospects, and I get all that. But the guy checks a lot of boxes. He's just a pure thrower. He throws a nice football. He can spin it. He's got the football IQ, intelligence, decision-making, accuracy, NFL size. He's a good athlete. There's just a lot to like about Hendon Hooker. And I think as this NFL draft process continues on and we get closer to the draft, I think more and more GMs and scouts are going back and saying, look, we don't want to pass up on this guy. And I think because of that, there's a very good chance that he ends up in the first round. And I think it's becoming more and more likely that that will be the case. And we talked about how we kind of dropped the ball on Lucas Van Ness, and I don't know how, but somehow we forgot to mention him in the mock draft in the first round when we both know he's going to go in the first round. I'm starting to think we might have dropped the ball on Hendon Hooker in picking him to go somewhere in the first round. Where are some potential landing spots that you could see him going? I know I've got a couple teams that I'm kind of circling here. What's a team or two that you think would be a spot to watch for in this first round for Hendon Hooker?
So, as I said, I look at him going anywhere between 20 and 31, but I'll start with number 19, Tampa Bay. If they don't make a move, if I'm not mistaken, Baker's only there on a 1-year deal. We know the type of weapons that they have. That offensive line is a bit shaky. However, you bring in Hendon Hooker, a mobile quarterback, he can help out with that while you rebuild that offensive line. And at the same time, with Mike Evans, CJ Gardner, I believe Russell Gage is there as well. You need to get a running back. And once you get that defense, rebuild that defense, this is a guy that this team can grow with and maintain in a weak NFC South and possibly be competitive while doing it. So Tampa Bay is the first spot I'm like, even though I said 20-31, but Tampa Bay right there at 19.
Yeah, and that's really an interesting one because when we talked about these potential trade scenarios, I mentioned Tampa Bay as a team that can maybe trade up because they might not be in the mix for one of these top quarterbacks. This is a team that, let's say they aren't able to find that trade partner, they're not able to move up and find the guy that they want. If Hendon Hooker is still sitting there at 19, that could be a really good spot. And like I mentioned, a quarterback needy team here. I think we know Kyle Trask probably isn't the future. I know we haven't really seen much from him, but he wasn't exactly a high-profile draft pick when he came out. I thought he was a big reach when they took him. Time will tell on that. But I think it's definitely one of those situations where they could use a guy that they could plug in and could start year one. That's not something that we're saying about Anthony Richardson. It's not something that we've said about Will Levis. But I think Hendon Hooker, with the experience and the intelligence and the decision-making, I think he's a guy that could have success right out of the gate. The Vikings, I think they lack the draft capital to really move up for one of these consensus top 3 or 4 quarterbacks, but they could be in a good position here with the 23rd pick to nab a guy like Hendon Hooker at number 23. Kirk Cousins, I think we've all seen enough from him to know that he's shown what his ceiling is. We know what it is. He's not a bad quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. He's just an average quarterback that clearly isn't a guy that's going to take you to the top of the mountain. And it's starting to feel more and more like they might need to start thinking about the future at that position. At 23, and right in that range that you talked about, Hendon Hooker could be a guy that they look to here. Maybe he sits behind Kirk Cousins for a year and they move forward with a young quarterback.
Yeah, I think when Minnesota a few years ago drafted Kellen Mond, they kind of thought they had a development, something they could put there behind Kirk Cousins and develop. And when they decided to move on, and I think that experiment has failed. And there is a stigma, again, air quotes, around Kirk Cousins. That is a very talented team on offense. You want to retain Justin Jefferson. You already went through something with Stephon Diggs. You don't want to do the same thing again. So you're going to want to have a capable quarterback that can get the ball out there to one of the best young receivers in the league. So I'm not surprised that you have an opportunity to take him there if he's sitting there at 23. However, at 22, let's get a little bit spicy. The Baltimore Ravens. We don't know what's going on with Lamar. I don't know. You don't know. I don't even think the Baltimore Ravens knows what's going on with Lamar Jackson except Lamar. If they should so happen to move off of Lamar, what better organization to go to than the Baltimore Ravens? Consummate winner, 30 years in the league, one of the top 3 franchises since they've entered the league 30 years ago, knows how to build a team. They will cater an offense to him. He will have time to develop. You have Eric DeCosta, Ozzie Newsome, two of the brightest minds in drafting and crafting teams and building teams. John Harbaugh, say what you want. He's been fine guiding that team. Let's just say Lamar bows out and says, hey, I want out of here. Why not? Why not Baltimore? You already have an offense that's set up for that similar style, but you have somebody who's done a lot more passing. To me, from my perspective, is a better pro-ready passer. I will repeat that again. He is a better pro-ready passer than what Lamar was. And I think a lot of the concepts that they want to instill now with their new OC, he can come in, slide right in, take that year off. You start Huntley, you train him up, and by next year, the 2024 season, he's ready to go. Let's get spicy. How about Hendon Hooker at 22?
I like it. I like it a lot. And for all the reasons you just said, that would be such a good fit. Bringing him in there with such a stable franchise, with such a great coach, such a great organization, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it really makes a lot of sense. And it would be a great landing spot for him as well, because you know they're going to put a good team around him. Now, I can't necessarily say the same thing, I should say, about the team I'm about to mention, but I think it's a team to watch for here. The Washington Commanders. Now, we talked about them last week, ushering in a new ownership group and wanting to kind of restart this franchise, so to speak, and rebuild this and get it moving in the right direction. What better way to do that than to find a young franchise quarterback in a guy like Hendon Hooker? Now, Commanders have Sam Howell entering year 2 at the quarterback position, but let's face it, there's a reason he went in the 5th round of last year's draft. Jacoby Brissett is a nice backup, but we know he's not the future and a guy that you can build around. So at 16, I think this could be a spot where they pull the trigger knowing that other teams in the back half of that first round are probably not going to let him fall into round 2.
Wow. I thought I was being spicy. That's actually very good. You have Eric Bieniemy there, who some think, I'm sorry, I used a lot of air quotes, who think is the coach in waiting there, who was also there with somebody named Patrick Mahomes that watched him, that understood what it meant to have a quarterback sit, learn, train them up, and then when they get to the new year, unleash him. Why not do the same thing here? You did it. You were a part of the team. You weren't the OC, but you were part of the team that did it there. Do it again here. And that has you set up. You've got Terry McCullum, you have Jahan Dotson, you have Brian Robinson. You have a very good, solid team that this guy has weapons when he comes into the league. And we already know about the defense, so we don't even need to go there. But right there, that's a little early. But as you did mention, with new ownership, and if new ownership understands the quarterback is the most important position on the team, why not? As you mentioned, Jacoby Brissett, and as you mentioned, Sam Howell, we know what Jacoby Brissett is, given capable backup, but not a full-time starter. We do not know what Sam Howell is. However, I believe voluntary OTAs opened up this week. Both have reported. I think they could possibly be looking at what's happening in OTAs and start moving some names up and down some draft boards, Hendon Hooker being one of them.
Man, Alex, this has been so much fun breaking down the NFL draft. I can't believe it's this Thursday. I want to give a shout out to the Tailgate Foodie for sponsoring today's episode. Check them out at thetailgatefoodie.com. After the draft, guys, we're going to be grading each team, telling you how they did and who hit home runs, who struck out. Lot more draft coverage coming after the draft. That's when it gets really fun to kind of see where all these prospects go. And we'll be having lots of great stuff ahead for season 5. I'm Brad Fowler. He's Alex Higdon. This is Pint Glass Football. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on new episodes, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.